So hey, recently I finished the first chapter of a little comic called Coining Crows. Did you read it? It'd be really cool if you did. I'd really appreciate it. Anyway, but after I posted it on Twitter, Tumblr, and here that I was going to be doing a how it was made breakdown thing, as well as talking about the characters. And I asked you to send me some questions. And I mean, I'm not calling anyone out, but I did only get questions on Tumblr. You know, not saying anything, but like... So, I'm not a professional, and this is the first comic I've ever really done. But through the process, I think I learned a lot. I feel I found some shorthands and made it a lot easier, not just in the art department, but in the convincing myself to actually start the project department. And I'm also very proud of what I did, so I wanted an excuse to talk about it. The very first step is knowing what you're making. Having an idea, like a reasonable one.
ChuubiFrog asked, what is the first character you made for the series and what inspired the story?
They're kids, to be honest. Coining Crow is a prequel to Keeping Crows, which is a much, much bigger series, but holds my whole heart. Originally, my big inspirations for that were Soul Eater, Teen Titans, The Good One, a little Undertale later. They've always been able to summon weapons. I didn't get that from Steven Universe, actually. But I've been working on it since I was in middle school? It's changed a lot. The story is way too big for me now, so I know I needed a story that was closer to a single episode instead of a full series. As much as I think starting your dream project is a good thing, be reasonable with yourself. Starting a huge project is a huge commitment, not to mention anxiety-inducing. The thing about Coining Crows is that it's actually like 4 times bigger than what I have done now, but I knew there's no way I could get myself to start a project that size without boogieing myself out. I actually tried already, and I did the first page and gave up. That's why the first page looks so much different than the rest of chapter 1. But, you know, I really wanted to be able to say that I did something and, like, finished it, so I told myself I'll do the first chapter and I won't do the rest. But at least for now. Breaking down big projects into small, self-contained goals kind of tricks your brain, I think. It'd be hard to be harsh and critical if you know it's just about 5 to 10 pages, and that's all you have to commit to now. The rough draft was pretty loose. I just bullet pointed a basic idea of what I wanted to tackle in the prequel, and identified the main conflicts standing in the way. Here it's actually a crow's greed and a bounty hunter who doesn't show up until later in chapter 2, along with a couple other characters, Mantle and Cole. But the first chapter itself is like self-contained, more of an introduction, which was perfect for this. Once the rough draft was done, I passed it around to a few people for their opinions, and then started drawing. I feel like not enough people talk about thumbnailing for comics, especially in long-form comics. It isn't a sketch phase, it's like very small drawings of me planning out panel layout, posing, framing, flow speech bubbles, you know, etc. I really didn't do any detail as long as I could tell who the characters were. Think of it like storyboarding for animations. It was a template, and I could bang out like 12 pages in a couple hours. This gave me direction anytime I finished a page, so I already knew I had something to work with or where I was going. And when it comes to sketching and roughs, I actually work pretty fast, so I finished this in like 2 to 3 settings maybe. At this point, I'm still working with traditional media. I find pencils and papers make loose, rough drawings a lot easier. I got some computer paper, quality doesn't matter, and I measured everything out. Page size, paneling, etc. Using the thumbnails, I cleaned everything up, figured out where the backgrounds would be, played with the perspectives. Since I already had the thumbnail, I already had a skeleton I was working with, so it was just dressing. The trick to staying focused on this project, at least for me, was making every step small. Making sure the step before that already led into it, so everything would just kind of flow together. This sketch was just clarifying the characters and backgrounds in the thumbnails, also touching up the script if I needed to. Now I'm finally bringing everything over to digital here. I didn't even scan my first sketches, I just took pictures of them because it was easier. Copied those over to my drawing program, did some clean sketches on top of those, made sure paneling was even, repositioned text I needed to. Again, the step before this was already pretty cleaned up, so this step was really just making lining easier, flipping the canvas, checking everything, and any last minute pose changes. There is no need to stick to a pose done during thumbnailing. Never be too set on your first idea.
Peaceful Roadkill asks, what was the hardest part of the comic?
Line art on these characters, it took so long. Luckily the second sketch was already pretty clean, so it wasn't one-to-one, but it was pretty clear, just tedious because of how many frames there were. I wanted to avoid just copying frames and changing the facial expressions, for the most part, because I wanted the characters to feel more fluid. But if you need to do that for your sanity, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it.
Peaceful Roadkill asked, how do you draw interior so well? Oh my god.
The Sims. So I don't remember where I heard this, but The Sims is a great place for interior references. I know a lot of people use 3D modeling for ease, but that's hard and Sims mods are easy, so I use that. You can design your building to match whatever you want, download whatever custom content you need, and then they edit stuff to your heart's desires. I pretty much strongly reference the screenshots I take of this, just redraw over them if I need to. It's fast and it looks fine. I really enjoy doing the forest though, because it's just a bunch of natural shapes that I kept pretty simple. When you're doing backgrounds for comics, you have to remember, they should not be high quality illustrations. Pop in the color from the character reference sheets, easy peasy. Then doing the backgrounds. I knew I wanted to keep it simple so I could do it at a decent pace. I changed the primary color of the backgrounds, depending on the location, so that each area kind of had a theme. For the forest, I tried to make the lighter color a yellow and the darker color a blue-ish. That way, it felt a little more alive than if it was just flat green. I also did some color corrections on the characters to match the backgrounds. Your character palette should shift if they're in different lighting, or if you're trying to convey a specific mood. For the forest, I put a more bluey filter on everyone to make it feel more cool, dark, and kind of spooky. I tried to keep the shading and lighting really basic. The background didn't even get any lighting unless there was a strong light source like Maddie's weapon. And boom, you finished a comic page in a relatively timely manner. So, Coining Crows and Keeping Crows is set in its own universe with a lot of specific world building, but generally Coining Crows is like basic fantasy setting with a little flavor over everything.
Peaceful Roadkill asks, besides the obvious, what's a cursed soul?
It's essentially the human word for any and all magical creatures. Demons, cursed souls, curses, etc. Later in the timeline, it becomes a rarer term, and they just kind of use demons for the most part, but that's how the Cursed King got his name. Beings from this world are, classified by the amount of magic they have in their soul. They all fall under one big umbrella, then separate from there.
Peaceful Roadkill asks, it's implied that witches are different than humans. What's the difference?
Nice catch, yeah, Crow says he's not a human, he's a witch. Remember how I said things are classified by the amount of magic in their soul? Cursed souls, or demons, are practically made of magic, while humans have none. Witches are like an in-between. Their souls aren't magic, but they can attune to it, meaning they can use it or generate it. Humans can't even use the magic in most magic items, like an enchanted map or magical transformation wand or something.
Wisp the Barn Apple asked, who's your favorite character in the comic and why? Do you have a favorite?
Hard question, but probably Crow, by a lot. He's just so dumb, and so central to this story, which I hold very close to my heart, so he's kind of important to me. That being said, I did hold a mini popularity contest on Tumblr for funsies, and Noxus won.
Peaceful Roadkill asks, what is everyone, imagining a Dungeons and Dragons equivalent? Both race and class?
This is interesting, because demons, witches, and humans all have subclasses that would work like D&D classes, but Noxus, rogue for sure, probably a changeling. Davis Tiefling, probably rogue, also he uses a finesse weapon, he's got a fencing sword. Crow, human wizard. Maddie, Leonin barbarian. Jet, shifter, maybe a monk.
Mad Pigeon asked, if your characters have human ethnicities and races, what would they be?
I'd need to do a lot more research to get specific, but in the most generalized sense, if they were real-world human characters, I'd want everyone to have heritage from a different place so it isn't too samey. Crow is probably North America, and Noxus would probably be from Asia. As broad as that is, I know. Maddie would be somewhere in Europe and Jetty Jetty? Oh. Maddie would probably be somewhere in Europe and Jet somewhere in South America. I think Davis would probably be from Africa or Asia as well. Crow and Jet are the only ones that I'm sure on though, because Corvids are mostly common in North America, and saber-toothed tigers are from North and South America. I also did consider giving Noxus a more Eastern outfit, but there's so much variety over in Asia that I didn't know where to start.
Peaceful Roadkill asks, how did the main trio meet?
Noxus has always been a little bit of a thief. Not maliciously, demons just stay hidden due to hunters. Crow kinda saw them once and saw the business opportunity. Noxus is pretty slippery though, so it was a chase. Davis fled the cursed world and then needed a job and a house. Crow ran into him and was practically begging him to join, which he refused for a while, but options are pretty slim, so he agreed eventually.
Babel asks, who has the biggest dick?
Your mom.
Anonymous asks, why is Crow's eye always closed?
He only has one eye.
Peaceful Roadkill asks, what happened to Crow's eye?
His familiar has his other eye. Her name is Phoenix, and he can see what she sees, if he wants. She's just a wee baby in this story, though.
Anonymous asks, why is Crow named Crow? Does he have any bird ancestry?
So his full name is Corvid Crow. His family does have a history of corvid familiars, mostly crows and ravens, but also magpies, blue jays, etc. But he did change his first name to Corvid because he thought it was cool.
Anonymous asked, Noxus is non-binary?
Yes.
Anonymous asked, what does Noxus' voice sound like?
So about Noxus talking, or rather the lack of, Noxus only talks when they have an intense emotional reason, which can include panic. I don't know if there's a real-world parallel. From what I've gathered, it is not like selective mutism. However, most of the time, they don't talk at all, mostly nonverbal. I think the first chapter is the only line of dialogue that they have, but, probably sounds kind of echoey and low.
Anonymous asked, would Noxus smooch a ghost?
Only platonically.
ChuubiFrog asked, is Davis single? Is Davis ready to mingle? Ideal type? Is Davis ready to mingle? Does Davis consider marriage?
Calm.
ChuubiFrog asked, theoretically, if I wanted to make a deal with Davis, cough, for perfectly innocent reasons, cough, what would he find valuable?
Despite only being in about 3 comic pages, Davis has amassed a handful of very dedicated fans. So while it hasn't been brought up in comic, I've mentioned before that Davis has the power to make soul-binding deals. It's pretty standard infernal demon power. However, I'm afraid he pretty much only uses it for tactical advantages for his team.
Anonymous asked, how old is Davis? Does he have parents?
Being an infernal demon, Davis essentially ages real slow. But also being born in the cursed world to a high-class family relationships aren't super important, so his house was more of just a place he lived before fleeing the cursed world. I didn't end up getting any questions about these two, which is pretty interesting. I figured strong cat girl and soft cat boy would be pretty popular. Actually pretty important to the story as it progresses, because they are the parents of Gray and Silver. Matty Gold and Jet Wild, like Jet Black. It's okay, you can admit I'm a creative genius. Anyway, Gray is one of the protagonists in Keeping Crows, along with Ray Piper. Crow is important because he's still around later in the story, and Noxus and Davis... the story has some turns as the timeline continues. So, pay attention and be advised. The Cursed King is always plotting.